There are words that slip into our lives, quietly. Words that seem harmless at first glance, yet when spoken in the context of a relationship, they can become seeds of manipulation, emotional irresponsibility, and ultimately self-erasure. These are not the words that shout or threaten, they are the ones that whisper, that disguise themselves as honesty, vulnerability, or even affection. They are the words that, if left unchecked, can quietly erode the foundation of self-worth and autonomy, especially for those who are striving to build healthy, fulfilling relationships in a world that often confuses love with control. To recognize these subtle but powerful signs is not merely a matter of emotional intelligence, it is an act of self-preservation. The modern woman, empowered and self-aware, faces a unique challenge to discern between genuine connection and covert manipulation, between support and subtle sabotage. The stakes are high, for the cost of ignoring these signs is not just heartbreak, it is the gradual loss of one's sense of self, the dimming of one's inner light, and the slow surrender of personal boundaries. Carl Jung, the eminent psychologist, spoke of the shadow unconscious, those hidden parts of ourselves and others that, if not brought to light, can govern our actions in destructive ways. In relationships, the shadow often emerges not as open hostility, but as disguised demands, as expectations wrapped in the language of love, as responsibilities quietly shifted from one person to another. Jung warned that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. But why is it so difficult to see these signs for what they are? Partly it is because we are conditioned by culture, by stories, by the very language of romance, to believe that love requires sacrifice, that compromise is a virtue, and that to care for someone is to accept them unconditionally. These beliefs, while noble in theory, can become dangerous when they are used as shields for irresponsibility, as excuses for stagnation, or as tools for control. The line between compassion and codependency is often thin, and it is drawn not by grand gestures, but by the everyday words we allow into our lives. Consider the seemingly innocuous phrases that often pass unchallenged. You have to accept me as I am. All my exes were crazy. If you really loved me, you'd do what I ask. You're not enough for me. Do whatever you want. Each of these statements, when examined closely, carries within it the potential for harm. They are not merely expressions of feeling. They are in many cases subtle attempts to shift responsibility, to evade growth, to manipulate boundaries, or to undermine self-esteem. The consequences of ignoring these signs are profound. Over time, the person on the receiving end begins to question their own perceptions, to doubt their instincts, to silence their needs in favor of someone else's comfort. It is a slow erosion, like water wearing away stone, and it often goes unnoticed until the damage is done. The result is not just an unhealthy relationship, but a diminished self, a person who has learned to accept less than they deserve, who has internalized the idea that their worth is contingent on someone else's approval. Yet there is hope. The first step toward reclaiming one's power is awareness. To recognize these patterns is to shine a light into the shadow, to disrupt the unconscious scripts that keep us trapped, and to begin the work of building relationships that are grounded in mutual respect, growth, and genuine care. This is not an easy path. It requires courage, discernment, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths, not just about others, but about ourselves. The Stoic philosophers, Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, taught that the only true freedom lies in self-mastery, in the ability to govern one's own mind and actions regardless of external circumstances. No man is free who is not master of himself, wrote Epictetus. In the context of relationships, this means that our greatest responsibility is to ourselves, to know our values, to set our boundaries, to refuse to be defined by another's expectations or manipulations. This script is an invitation, a call to vigilance, to self-respect, and to action. It is a guide for those who wish to navigate the complexities of modern relationships with wisdom and strength, who seek not just to avoid harm, but to cultivate the kind of love that elevates rather than diminishes. Over the next sections, we will examine in detail the specific phrases that often signal deeper issues, unpack their hidden meanings, and offer practical strategies for responding with clarity and integrity. You are not alone in this journey. Many have walked this path before you, and many will walk it after. The difference between those who thrive and those who merely survive is not luck, but awareness, the willingness to see clearly, to act decisively, and to honor one's own worth above all else. As we move forward, remember your value is not determined by anyone's words or actions, but by your own unwavering commitment to yourself. Among the most deceptively simple phrases that can echo through a relationship, "You have to accept me as I am," stands out for its apparent vulnerability. On the surface, it seems to ask for understanding, for unconditional love. Yet when spoken as a shield against accountability or change, it becomes a quiet weapon, a way to close the door on growth, to shift the burden of adaptation entirely onto the other person. In its most toxic form, this phrase is not a plea for acceptance, but a declaration of emotional inertia. Let us examine what lies beneath these words. To accept someone as they are is in principle a beautiful thing. It is the foundation of empathy, the essence of genuine connection. But when this acceptance is demanded as a condition, when it is used to justify patterns of behavior that cause harm or discomfort, it ceases to be a virtue and becomes a form of manipulation. It says, in effect, "I will not change, and your desire for improvement or mutual growth is unreasonable." It is a subtle way of refusing responsibility for one's actions while placing the weight of adaptation squarely on the other's shoulders. Carl Jung's concept of the shadow represents the parts of ourselves we reject or deny, and leaving them unexamined can govern us destructively. Jung believed that true wholeness comes not from ignoring the shadow, but from acknowledging and integrating it. When someone insists they must be accepted as they are, without any willingness to reflect or evolve, they are refusing to face their own shadow. They are asking their partner to carry what they themselves will not. This refusal is not just a personal failing, it is a relational one. Relationships are living things, and like all living things, they require growth to survive. To demand acceptance without offering growth is to ask for a static, unchanging relationship, one that will suffocate under its own stagnation over time. It is like building a house on sand, expecting it to withstand the storms of life without ever reinforcing the foundation. The Stoic philosophers offer wisdom here. "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one," wrote Marcus Aurelius. The Stoics believed that virtue is not a state to be claimed, but a practice to be lived. To demand acceptance without striving for virtue is to miss the point entirely. Seneca reminds us, "He who is brave is free." Freedom in relationships comes not from demanding unconditional acceptance, but from the courage to face one's own flaws and to grow in response to love, not in spite of it. Let us consider a real-world example. Imagine a woman named Anna who has been with her partner for several years. She notices troubling patterns, his defensiveness toward feedback, a tendency to dismiss her concerns, reluctance to apologize or admit mistakes. When she tries to address these issues, he responds, "You have to accept me as I am. This is just who I am." Over time, Anna begins to question herself. Is she asking too much? Is her desire for growth unreasonable? She starts to silence her needs, to shrink her expectations, to accept less and less in the name of love. But love, real love, is not about shrinking. It is about expansion of self, of understanding of possibility. When one partner refuses to grow, the other must choose accept stagnation or risk loss. It is a cruel dilemma, one that no one should have to face. The truth is that healthy relationships thrive on mutual growth. Each person brings strengths and weaknesses, shadows and light, creating a space where both can evolve. To demand acceptance without offering growth is to ask for less than what a relationship could be. What then is the wise response to this phrase? It begins with clarity. Recognize the difference between acceptance and enablement. Acceptance means loving someone in their imperfection. Enablement means excusing behavior that is harmful or stagnant. The line is not always clear, but it is vital. If you find yourself repeatedly asked to accept behaviors that undermine your well-being or values, it is time to set boundaries. Boundaries are not walls. They define where you end and another begins. They are acts of self-respect, not rejection. As Epictetus taught, no person is free who is not master of themselves. To set a boundary is to claim mastery over your own experience, to refuse to be defined by someone else's refusal to grow. In practice, this might sound like I care for you deeply and I accept you as a person, but I also need to see willingness to grow to address issues that affect our relationship. I am not asking for perfection, but for effort. This is not an ultimatum. It is an invitation to growth, to partnership, to shared responsibility. If the other person cannot or will not accept this invitation, the choice becomes clear. You are not obligated to remain in a relationship that demands your silence or your stagnation. You are worthy of a love that grows with you, that challenges you to become more, not less. As you move forward, remember, staying true to your values and acting with integrity is the highest form of self-respect. Walk away knowing that your value is not measured by anyone's standards but your own. In the end, you have to accept me as I am is not a call for love, it is a call for complacency. Do not answer it with silence. Answer it with clarity, with courage, and with the unwavering belief that you deserve a relationship that honors your growth as much as your acceptance. There are certain phrases that, while seemingly casual or even humorous, carry within them the seeds of deeper dysfunction. Among these, "all my exes were crazy" or "all my exes were toxic" is perhaps one of the most telling. On the surface, it may sound like a simple recounting of bad luck in love, a way to bond over shared stories of heartbreak. But beneath this veneer lies a pattern of blame, of victimhood, and of a refusal to take responsibility for one's own role in past relationship dynamics. When someone repeatedly characterizes all their former partners as crazy or toxic, they are painting themselves as the perpetual victim, never at fault. This narrative absolves the speaker of any need for self-reflection or growth. It is easier to believe the world is full of unreasonable people than to confront that one's own actions may have contributed to past relationship breakdowns. Carl Jung reminds us that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. To dismiss all former partners as flawed is to project one's own shadow outward and avoid growth. This sets the stage for repeating the same patterns with new partners over and over. For the person hearing this, often early in a relationship, it can be both flattering and unsettling. It may feel like a compliment. You're different. You're not like the others. But it is a warning sign. This hints that conflicts will be met with blame and dismissal, not dialogue and understanding. It is an early glimpse into a worldview where problems are always externalized and responsibility is always someone else's. The Stoic philosophers teach the value of self-examination. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If someone does wrong, it is because he does not know what is right. If you know what is right, then teach by example." In relationships, growth comes from asking, "What can I learn?" Not, "What did they do to me?" To be with someone who refuses this is to become caretaker of their insecurities and resentments. Now let us turn to the second phrase. "If you really loved me, you'd do what I ask." This is the language of emotional manipulation, weaponizing affection into compliance. Imagine being asked to do something that violates your boundaries, then challenged with, "If you really loved me, you'd do it." The conversation shifts from the request to your worthiness as a partner. The pressure to comply is immense, not because the request is reasonable, but because refusal incurs guilt or rejection. Epictetus warned, "No one can harm you unless you consent." Boundaries are ours to define. When love is used as leverage, it seeks control, not connection. Emotional manipulation often begins subtly with small demands justified by love or loyalty. Over time, these demands erode autonomy and self-making the relationship a performance. The wise response begins with awareness. Notice blame and manipulation early. Respond with clarity and firmness. "I care for you, but my love is not measured by ignoring my needs." If someone blames all their exes, ask, "What did you learn? What would you do differently now?" Invite dialogue, not defensiveness, growth, not stagnation. Trust your instincts. You are not responsible for healing someone else's wounds. You deserve a relationship where both partners take responsibility, where love is given freely. Seneca. As is a tale, so is life. Not how long it is, but how good it is what matters. Relationship quality is measured by growth together and apart. Stay true to your values. Set boundaries with compassion and seek love that lifts, not weighs you down. Few words cut as deeply as those that question our fundamental worth. "You're not enough for me," a phrase that, whether uttered in anger, disappointment, or cold detachment, strikes at the very heart of our need for acceptance and belonging. To hear these words from someone we care about is to be confronted with a challenge not only to our relationship, but to our sense of self. Let us look closely at what this phrase truly means. On its surface, it presents itself as a simple declaration of dissatisfaction, an honest if painful expression of unmet needs. But beneath this apparent candor lies a more insidious mechanism, the manipulation of self-esteem through moving goalposts and shifting standards. The person who says, "You're not enough for me," rarely offers concrete reasons or actionable feedback. Instead, the standard for enough is left vague, unattainable, always just out of reach. The result is a perpetual striving, a constant effort to prove one's worth to someone who is determined never to be satisfied. This dynamic is not only emotionally exhausting, it is deeply corrosive. Over time, the recipient of such messages may begin to internalize the belief that they are fundamentally lacking, that no matter how hard they try, they will always fall short. This is the slow poison of conditional love. Affection and approval are dangled like carrots, always contingent on meeting some new undefined expectation. The relationship becomes a performance, a test with no passing grade, and the cost is the gradual erosion of confidence, joy, and authenticity. Carl Jung's wisdom is particularly illuminating here. He wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." In a healthy relationship, both partners are encouraged to embrace this challenge, to accept themselves and each other, flaws and all, and to grow together from a place of mutual respect. But when one partner continually suggests that the other is not enough, they are projecting their own insecurities, their own shadows onto the relationship. They are unable or unwilling to face their own dissatisfaction, and so they make it the other person's problem. The message is clear: if only you were different, I would be happy. The Stoic philosophers, too, offer guidance in the face of such manipulation. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." When someone tries to define your worth by their shifting standards, it is essential to remember that their opinion is not a measure of your value. Seneca wrote, "No man was ever wise by chance." Wisdom in love, as in life, requires discernment, the ability to separate what is within our control from what is not. You cannot control another's dissatisfaction, nor can you fill the voids they refuse to confront within themselves. Consider the example of Maya, a woman who finds herself constantly striving to please her partner. No matter what she does, how she dresses, what she achieves, how she supports him, he always finds something lacking. "You're not ambitious enough," he says one week. "You're too focused on your career," he complains the next. The criteria for enough are always shifting, always unattainable. Maya begins to lose sight of who she is outside the relationship. Her dreams, her passions, her sense of self-worth all become secondary to the endless quest for approval. This is the danger of allowing someone else to set the terms of your value. It is like building a house on sand. No matter how beautiful the structure, it cannot stand if the foundation is unstable. In the end, the problem is not with Maya, but with the impossibility of satisfying someone who is determined never to be satisfied. The standard is a mirage, a moving target that keeps her running but never arriving. What then is the wise response? First, recognize the pattern. If you find yourself constantly trying to meet someone else's ever-changing expectations, pause and ask, whose standards am I living by? What do I want for myself independent of their approval? It is not selfish to prioritize your own well-being. It is an act of self-preservation. Jung teaches us that what you resist persists. If you resist the truth of your own value, you will remain trapped in the cycle of seeking validation from those who cannot or will not give it. Second, reclaim your narrative. Your worth is not determined by anyone else's opinion. It is inherent, unchanging, rooted in your very existence. The Stoics remind us that external validation is fleeting, but self-respect endures. Epictetus wrote, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." When faced with the accusation of not being enough, respond, not with defensiveness or desperation, but with quiet confidence. I am enough just as I am. I am open to growth, but I will not sacrifice my self-worth for anyone's approval. Finally, be willing to walk away from those who cannot or will not appreciate your true value. This is not an act of bitterness or revenge, but of self-respect. To stay in a relationship where your worth is constantly questioned is to accept a life of perpetual striving and dissatisfaction. You deserve more. You deserve a love that celebrates your strengths, supports your growth, and honors your unique journey. As you move forward, remember the standards by which you measure yourself should be your own, not those imposed by others. Seek relationships that are rooted in mutual respect, where both partners are free to grow, to change, and to accept themselves and each other completely. Anything less is a mirage, a shadow of love that can never truly satisfy. Among the most insidious forms of manipulation in relationships is not the overt demand or the shouted accusation, but the quiet dismissive phrase delivered with a shrug, "Do whatever you want." On the surface, it masquerades as indifference or even generosity, suggesting that the other person is free to make their own choices. But beneath this veneer lies a current of resentment, sarcasm, and passive aggression, a refusal to engage honestly, a withdrawal of emotional presence disguised as permission. To understand the true impact of this phrase, imagine a scenario. You bring up a topic that matters to you, perhaps a decision about how to spend your weekend, or a concern about something that's been troubling you. Instead of a thoughtful response, you are met with, "Do whatever you want." The words hang in the air, heavy with unspoken accusation. You sense that your partner is not truly giving you freedom, but rather punishing you for having your own desires, for asserting your independence, for daring to act in ways that might not align with their unspoken expectations. This is the hallmark of passive-aggressive communication. Rather than expressing disappointment, disagreement, or hurt directly, the speaker retreats into ambiguity, leaving the other person to guess at their true feelings. It is a form of emotional withdrawal, a way to avoid vulnerability while still exerting control. The message is clear: I am upset, but I will not tell you why. You must figure it out on your own, and you will be punished for getting it wrong. Carl Jung wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." In relationships, passive aggression is often a sign of unacknowledged needs or unresolved resentments. The person who says, "Do whatever you want," may be struggling to articulate their feelings or may fear that direct communication will lead to conflict or rejection. But by refusing to engage honestly, they create a climate of confusion and mistrust where genuine intimacy becomes impossible. The Stoic philosophers remind us that true strength lies in clarity and self-control. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." In the context of relationships, this means that honesty is not merely a virtue, but a necessity. When communication breaks down into sarcasm, ambiguity, or silent treatment, both partners suffer. The one on the receiving end is left feeling isolated and unsure, while the one who withdraws becomes increasingly disconnected from their own needs and desires. Consider the example of Olivia, who often finds herself on the receiving end of passive-aggressive remarks from her partner. Whenever she suggests something he disagrees with, he responds with, "Do whatever you want," or "I don't care." At first, Olivia tries to take these words at face value, making decisions on her own and hoping that her partner will appreciate her independence. But over time, she notices that her choices are met with coldness, withdrawal, or even subtle retaliation. The relationship becomes a minefield where every decision feels like a potential trigger for conflict. This dynamic is not only exhausting, it is deeply damaging. It erodes trust, undermines intimacy, and creates a sense of walking on eggshells. The cost is not just emotional, it is existential. Olivia begins to doubt her own judgment, to second-guess her choices, to silence her needs in the hope of avoiding conflict. She becomes a stranger to herself, living not for her own happiness, but for the avoidance of someone else's silent disapproval. What then is the antidote to passive aggression? The answer lies in direct, compassionate communication. It is not enough to avoid conflict. True intimacy requires the courage to speak openly about one's feelings, needs, and boundaries. This is not always easy, especially when old wounds or fears of rejection are at play, but it is the only path to genuine connection. If you find yourself on the receiving end of "do whatever you want," pause and ask for clarity. "I sense that you're upset. Can we talk about what's really going on?" Invite honesty, not as a demand, but as an offering a chance to deepen your understanding of each other. If your partner is unwilling or unable to engage, remember that you are not responsible for managing their emotions or deciphering their silences. You are responsible only for your own integrity, your own clarity, your own well-being. The Stoics teach us that we cannot control the actions of others, only our own responses. Epictetus wrote, "Make the best use of what is in your power, and take the rest as it happens." In relationships, this means accepting that not every conflict can be resolved, not every partner will choose honesty over ambiguity. But you can choose how you respond. You can choose to set boundaries, to ask for what you need, to walk away from dynamics that diminish your sense of self. As we draw these lessons together, let us return to the central theme, the importance of self-respect, clarity, and mutual growth in relationships. The phrases we have explored: "You have to accept me as I am," "All my exes were crazy," "If you really loved me, you'd do what I ask," "You're not enough for me," and "Do whatever you want," are not merely words. They are signals, invitations to examine the deeper dynamics at play, to recognize patterns of manipulation, blame, and emotional withdrawal. To build relationships that are healthy, fulfilling, and resilient, we must be willing to confront these patterns with courage and compassion. This means setting boundaries not as acts of rejection, but as acts of self-love. It means holding ourselves and our partners accountable for growth, not as a condition for love, but as an expression of it. It means refusing to accept less than we deserve, not out of pride, but out of a deep commitment to our own well-being. As you move forward, remember, your value is not determined by anyone else's approval. Your worth is not measured by your ability to endure, and your happiness is not contingent on someone else's willingness to communicate. You are the author of your own story, the guardian of your own heart, the architect of your own life. Build wisely, love bravely, and never settle for less than the respect and clarity you deserve. In closing, let the words of Seneca guide you. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. Do not waste your time on relationships that drain your spirit, that cloud your mind, that erode your sense of self. Seek out those who meet you with honesty, with respect, with a willingness to grow together and apart. In this, you will find not only love but freedom.